Hello everybody and welcome to our next job in the workshop, and that is an engine rebuild of this 1975 Trident T160. As you can see, the engine is not there, and that will require rebuilding. We're not really going to be doing any of the cycle work, the brakes, wheels and frame, etc., electrics and so on. As far as we know, they're already there. Excuse me, my voice and that. I'm just recovering from, I had really bad, like a flu thing. I've had my flu jab, and I did all the COVID tests, and it wasn't COVID, but I think it was a type of flu I've had. Even though I've had my flu jab, there's different strains of flu that go around. I've been really ill. Whew. I'm coming out the other side now, but yeah, that wasn't nice. I was really, really bad for a couple of days there. Anyway, still being a bit bunged up, but never mind. So we're going to be rebuilding the engine mainly on this T160. Now, this is how the engine has arrived in these boxes. Now, ordinarily, I would not recommend anyone to buy a bike that was in boxes if you have never rebuilt that engine before. Because, it's in boxes, which is nice, and there's some labelling like primary side, but that's about it. So for instance, in here, this box, so we've got a starter motor, a gear lever, a horn, parts, brackets for the oil cooler, the anti-drain valve in the sump, the clutch cover, the tachometer drive, and so on. So what I'm saying is, unless you knew what things were, you'd never work out what everything was. It might be in boxes and it's relatively sorted, but obviously not completely. In our case, it's okay because I've rebuilt these engines a few times now, so I know basically what every single nut and bolt is on the engine. So that's okay. If I wasn't familiar with this particular engine, then I would balk at doing, a rebuild that someone just brought in all the boxes like this. Okay, so, you can rebuild an engine. People buy, unfinished restorations and so in boxes, which is fine, but it's just 10 times harder. If you don't know the bike, the particular engine. In our case, we rebuilt it before, so I know all the bits. But if you don't know a bike, buying a bike, you don't know if the bits are there, you don't know where they go or anything like that. So I would advise against it unless you're familiar with this particular model of bike. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox all of this. I'm going to rebox it. I'm going to bag it in my infamous freezer bags, label it with my marker. First thing I do, and I'll take it out of all these boxes and we'll label everything up and give it a very brief initial inspection, and just to see exactly what we got, only very brief, and then I'll be contacting the owner and we'll be discussing exactly what sort of restoration he's looking for, whether he wants all the cases blasted, whether he wants them polished, how much of the bearings he wants to replace them, what work he wants to do on the head and the valves and so on. And after that, then we'll make a start. But the first thing I'm going to do is just rebox everything. And whilst I do that, have a very brief inspection to see, any major damage or what condition the engine's in generally. Oh dear, I'm still suffering a bit. Anyway, here we have a not so beautiful bike that we will be turning into a beautiful bike. It looks, pretty original. It's got a tri-spark ignition, electronic ignition. But apart from that, it all looks pretty, pretty sort of standard, sort of 70s fare. I don't think it's been messed about with that much. Yeah. What mileage we got on it? 28, nearly 29,000. Yeah. So that's quite a high mileage for these bikes. It's got one thing it has got, yes, it's got the hydraulic clutch conversion, which I've never worked on before. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, so the whole mechanism from the pipe hydraulic pipe downwards is should be in those boxes somewhere. But I've never worked on one before, so that would be an interesting thing to work on, the hydraulic clutch. Yeah, but apart from that, it's all is fairly standard. Okay, so I'm going to set to work now, unboxing, a brief initial appraisal, get everything bagged and tagged, and then contact the owner, have a chat, and decide where we're going to go to from here. Okie dokie, so I've sorted through all the parts, unboxed them out of their cardboard boxes, and sort of reorganised them into my plastic boxes, and everything seems to be pretty okay. Whoever took the engine apart knew what they were doing, and everything's been labelled and marked as it should have been. So, you know, that's great. Like, for instance, the tappets, cam followers, they've still got their cable ties on to stop them falling through, so they're all still in the same place, and so on. Con rods have been marked, which one's which, etc., etc. So all looks okay. I've got some parts up here. Unfortunately, I've got a bulb gone, so it's a bit dark at the moment. But it's all looking okay, and it seems to be virtually all there. So what we're going to do is the owner wants the full Monty, so that means we're going to strip everything right down, everything out completely, and then we're going to vapor blast all the cases. Then we're going to have the outer cases machine polished to a mirror finish, and then we're going to rebuild the crank. I'm not really started to look at things, but the crank is really badly worn, so that's obviously going to need a regrind, but we're probably going to put in all new bearings. It's been sitting, you know, I don't know if you can see here, you know, that bearing's gone a bit rusty from where it's been apart. So, you know, I wouldn't reuse that anyway, because obviously the engine's been taken apart a few months ago, I think, or up to a year ago. It's been sitting without oil, so I think we'll be replacing all the bearings anyway, and probably new valves, guides, etc. I'm going to look at those. You know, I'm not sure, because, you know, what condition the barrels in. I haven't really looked at the barrels yet. Just looking now. Yeah, there seems to be some vertical scoring, at least. I'm not sure about the sort of actual wear, you know, as in whether they've worn elliptical or whatever. But there's obviously some vertical scoring there, so we'll have a look at those. I think I had a look at the pistons. It's obviously been burning oil because the piston crowns are pretty black. I don't think they're oversized pistons. I think it's still a standard bore. I couldn't see because of the amount of crud on top of the piston crowns. Also, you can see, it looks like it has been leaking a bit of oil as well. So it's been burning oil, leaking oil. Mainly it looks a bit from the cylinder head, you know, from probably around the push rod tubes or whatever, and maybe from the head gasket. But it all looks, you know, okay. There's nothing nasty. There's no sign of it having had a broken piston or anything in the past. Any you know, welding or whatever to the cases. So on paper, it should be straightforward. It's just the amount of labour involved. I've got in stripping everything down, taking all the bearings out, taking all the seals out, everything out of the cases, so they can then go off for blasting. You know, we've got to take the rocker boxes apart. We've got to take the rocker box shafts out. We've got to take all the valves out. We'll probably have new valve guides anyway. You know, strip everything out of the barrels and then take everything down for blasting. We may put in a triplex chain, primary chain conversion, because as you may know, for the T160, the primary chains are no longer available. They were made by Reynolds specifically just for the T160, the primary chain, and so they're no longer available. So you can either fit a belt drive, or the latest, more modern way of doing it is to fit a triplex chain drive. Get it right? Let me get it right. Yeah, because these are what's called a duplex chain on the T160. So that's 2 rows of chain. Whereas the T150s used triplex. The earlier models used a 3 row chain. I think they used a 2-row chain on the T160 to try and make room for the extra gear change mechanism in the primary chain case. But it actually turns out you don't really need that extra room. You can fit a triplex chain, which are available. And so we'll probably do a primary chain conversion back to triplex on this. It's already got electronic ignition fitted. So we're just going to be cleaning it up, putting it back together, probably a rebore, rehone or regrind the crankshaft, take the plugs out. I think the plugs are already out actually. Clean it all out, put the new plugs back in, and all new bearings, all new seals, etc. But it's generally, there's nothing broken or damaged that I can see. I think it's got a fairly recent clutch, but we'll be taking that apart, and seeing. It's not got, for a start, it's not got the lock tabs around the edge of the clutch. So obviously someone's had it apart, but then the fact they've not put lock tabs back on, I'm not sure, how good a job they've made of it. So we'll have to see. Okay, yeah, and there's the bike itself waiting for the. And what we'll do is we'll rebuild the engine back in the frame. We'll use the frame as the bike as like a glorified engine stand, and we'll actually rebuild the engine back in the frame, because then you don't have to worry at the end about lugging that huge engine trying to get it back in place. So I find it quite easy to, because again the bike's on the hoist, so you can have it at any height. Whereas it's on the bench, it tends, on the stand, it tends to just be one height, and it's always just a bit too high or too low. If I have the engine in there, then I can adjust the height exactly to where I want it. So it can be an advantage in that respect. And also, as I say, you don't have to worry about trying to put the engine back in at the end, because it's already been built in situ. So obviously, the first thing we're going to have to do before rebuilding is clean all this up. It's all a bit manky, as you'd expect. It's a pretty sort of original bike. It looks like. Obviously it's had upgrades like front brake, etc. But I don't think it's been messed about with that much. We'll see. One thing I'm unsure of, that I just on first inspection, is that these look like what I would call long valves. Now, long valves, as far as I knew, are those lash caps on there? I'm not sure. Right, I'll have to have a look. Sorry, I'm muttering to myself, because I thought these are either long valves, or which are fitted to earlier bikes, not later bikes, and unless these have got what's called lash caps fitted, so they're caps that go over the top of the valve and protect it from the rockers. So I'm not sure. I'm surprised that they're long valves, but then they don't look like lash caps to me, so I'm not sure. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right, there we go. Anyway, all ready, and after Christmas, because it's just gone up to Christmas here now, then I'll strip everything. We'll take everything, completely strip it down. I'll do it all on camera, don't worry. And then we'll send everything off to be blasted and polished, etc. And while that's happening, we'll order some parts, get the actual frame ready, and take the crankshaft down to get that ground. Then when the barrels and that are back, we'll take them down. The barrels and the head we'll take down to have a rebore and new valve guides put in. Okie dokie. Jolly good. Right, so next video will be in a couple of weeks' time after Christmas, New Year, and we'll crack on with getting it taken apart, and hopefully by then I'll have a new bulb to replace the one that's blown above the bench.